Hello, and this is a follow-up to last weekend's webinar where we talked about EdgeRater for HGSI users. This is now a week later, so a full 5 days of trading have occurred, and I want to go through a couple of the things that were missed last weekend and talk about how you can do some of the things that we did last weekend, how you do them the second time that you run them, so you don't have to go through the setup process again. So we're going to talk about the warehouse report template. That's another template that you can use once you've generated that warehouse or securities symbol list. And we'll talk also about the US market summary template. So let's go ahead. So first of all, I have already updated my HGSI database. And so since this is the second time that I'm running HGSI after doing the initial setup steps, whenever I come into the warehouse now and I'm looking at all securities and the archive view that we had selected last time, remember the archive view is under the EdgeRater views, which you got from installing the add-on. So I don't have to set that up anymore. Now when I go File, Save as HTML, it's already got the location set up. So the only thing I have to do here is just press Save, and it's going to say the file already exists. Do you want to replace it? I'll say yes. Warehouse view successfully saved, and I'm done with HGSI steps at that point. So very simple. Every day or however frequently you do your updates, you can go in and then save that warehouse view as HTML file, and that's it, done. So then we open up EdgeRater and come to the generate indexes from warehouse template. You'll note that the location is already saved. It's saved in the template. It's remembered from last time, and it's just pointing to that all securities HTML file that I just saved from HGSI. And all I have to do on this template is just run it. So no setup steps at all, just run the template. And that is, as you see at the bottom of the screen, it's going to say converting the warehouse HTML file to Excel. So it's going to go through a few steps. It's now going to build a snapshot for EdgeRater to use, containing all of the securities and the history, a 10-year history of all of those securities in that snapshot. And I'm going to pause the video as it goes through these things, but the other step. So now it's building the warehouse industry groups indexes. Now it's building the major industry group indexes. Now it's building the sector indexes. And now it's building the SIC code group indexes. And now it's finished. And when it's finished, you just see a report which just contains the final status of the build. So it tells you here that index generation is completed. It has built a warehouse all securities snapshot. It's built the industry group indexes, the sector indexes, the major industry indexes, and the SIC group indexes. So it's just information all there, and that's all you need to see from here. You can close that down. It's just for information purposes only. I won't save it. I'll just close it. So now that means that in my symbol lists, I have the 5 new lists. Well, they already existed because we generated them last weekend, but they've now been updated with current data. So data to 4/24/2020 for all securities. Now, all securities is just a list of every security it found in the warehouse, exported warehouse file. That's 8,828. And then it's fetched data from HGSI for all of those symbols. So that's a list of all of your HGSI symbols in there. Then the industry group indexes have been updated to 4/24, and there's 175 of those. The major industry groups, there's 48 of them, they've also been updated. The sector indexes, there's only 10 of those, they've all been updated too. And then the sick code group indexes, there's 400 of those, and they are also updated. So once you've run that template, generate indexes from warehouse, when you look in your symbol list, you should find that those 5 new lists are up to date, and you can always tell by the to date column, which gives you the very last bar's date. Okay, so let's have a look at what else you can do with this information. As part of running that template, EdgeRater converts this all securities HTML file, which was exported from HGSI, into an XLSX file. That is an Excel file. And we ran this last weekend, so on 4/17. So it generated one for 4/17. You've essentially got an Excel file, so it's XLSX format, and you would be able to open that up in Excel and see everything. And I just ran this today, so 420 for the date of 4/24. That was Friday's data. So now we have one for 4/24. And as you run this, however frequently you run it, every time you run it, a new file will be placed in this folder, and it will be identified by the date of the last bar. So as you build these up, you're going to get more and more of these files in here, and that just serves as a record for the state of the HGSI warehouse on that particular day. And that can be useful for the warehouse report, which is another template in EdgeRater. So I'm going to use the one that we generated last weekend for the last trading day, 4/17, and just show what information you can get from this by running the warehouse report. So I go back into EdgeRater and come back to the HGSI group and scroll down and look for warehouse report. I'll put a little star by there, and just so that then appears in my favorites group. If I'm running this frequently, I want it to appear in my favorites group, so I don't have to search through all the different groups to find the template that I always run. So now it's here, warehouse report, and there are a couple of settings to change on here. So we'll go and set that up. Change settings will bring up another dialog box, and we first of all need to browse for a warehouse file. So open up the EdgeRater HGSI warehouse archive folder and find the date of interest. If you have a warehouse file saved for a particular date, select that. And I'm interested in 4/17. So I'm going to select the 4/17 warehouse view. And what I then want to do is, based on the state of the warehouse, I want to run an analysis from 4/17/2020 up to present day. So what I can do for present day is either type in the current day or a date beyond the current day. So I could do 12/31/2020. And I won't choose auto create data snapshot every run. If I have that chosen, when I run the template, EdgeRater is just going to go to the warehouse and recreate the all securities snapshot, and that takes a few minutes. So I'm not going to do that because I already have all securities, and I need to make sure I have warehouse all securities selected over here. This contains all the data in the warehouse, all the historical data for every symbol. And so I'm able to use this symbol list and this snapshot of data with this template set up in this way. And all I do then is press run. And it's going to go and analyze all of those symbols. It's going to group them by various groupings. We'll see in a minute. There's the ERG group. There's the relative strength rankings. There's the HGS boxes. We'll see that over here. Let me just close the chart, or just scrunch the chart up. I can actually close the chart by saying don't show chart. And now this report has got various worksheets associated with it. So the dashboard sheet is essentially a summary of all of the information. So before going to the summary, let's go to the individual pieces of information that have been extracted to produce this summary. So the first thing is, and just to give you an idea of what has occurred here, is first thing is it's made a copy of the warehouse XLSX file because it uses that information to calculate the other things in the report. Now there's going to be some missing data because between one warehouse save and another warehouse save, some symbols are not going to be available. So there's going to be some missing data. But then it's going to go ahead with the data that is available, and for every symbol it will take the closing price on the start date and the closing price on the end date. Remember, we chose a start and an end date before running the template. It's going to say what those two prices were, and then it's going to calculate a % change for all of the stocks. So if we come down through the list, you'll see it's done that for every single symbol in here. And then the template has taken that information and grouped all the stocks by various fields. So one of the groupings is the ERG. So ERG, earnings, relative strength, and group, is something in HGSI. The higher the ERG, the higher those three components, to a maximum of 300 and a lowest of 1. And it's basically giving you a profile. It's bucketized all of those values, and the buckets that have been used here have been, from 0 to 10 ERG. There are 4,000 stocks that are in the the first one is 0 to 0, so things that don't actually have an ERG. There's 4,000 of those. Then from 1 to 10, there's 4 of those. 11 to 20, there's 33 of those, etc., all the way through to 291 to 300, and there are only 6 stocks that have that ERG ranking. And then it's calculated the average % change for those different ERG, and I will call them buckets, those ERG buckets. All right, these are all the buckets, the from and the to. This is a text representation of that range. This is the number of stocks that are in that range, and then this is the average % change of those values, of those groups, of those buckets. And then above is the chart showing you that same information. The blue line is the actual average % change. Along the x-axis are all of the buckets. And then the gray line in the background is the count for each bucket. So you can see for the very low 1 to 10 ERG, and we're not plotting the 0, by the way, but for the very low 1 to 10, you can see that there are not many stocks in that bucket. Most of the stocks, the majority of the stocks, are in the 131 to 140 bucket, and there's very few in the 291 to 300 bucket, as you would expect. Only the best of the best stocks make it into that bucket. And then you've got a % change over this period of time for each of those buckets. So from here you can see that actually the bucket that performed the best here is the 11 to 20 bucket, which had a 28%, 33 stocks in there with an average gain of 28%. And then as you come down through, or come up through the list, you get a little worse until you get to the center, and you start then to improve. The gains have improved in towards the higher buckets. But the best performance has actually been essentially a junk off the bottom, you would call this, really, because these are the stocks that have really been beaten down, have got very poor EPS, very poor relative strength, very poor group strength, and hence their ERG number is quite low. But they are also quite volatile, and often you'll find that these actually have the best performance, but with a lot of volatility. And then and because there are so few in here too, the average is taken over a much lower number of stocks. But when you start getting up into the mid buckets, you're averaging many more stocks. But you can see that the ERG over last week anyway, you had better performance. If you say you're going to only look at stocks that have an ERG ranking of 150 and above, then you could say, well, actually the best performance was in the above 260 and beyond, and you had a 5% gain. But of course, if you went down to these very low ERG ranked stocks, you actually would have averaged out a much larger gain. That's what this is trying to show you, and you can choose any time frame to do this. But remember that it's important that you have a warehouse file saved, like the XLSX file, for the date that you want to start the analysis on, because that's going to have the ERG rankings, the EPS rankings, the HGS group rankings for that particular date, which is important for this report. So that's ERG. Let's look at EPS. So this is a grouping of EPS, and EPS is split into different buckets: 0 to 10, 0, 1 to 10, 11 to 20, all the way through 91 to 100. And it's got the count again here, and then the percent change. So the very low EPS ranked stocks had better, but once you've got through, and also you've got the numbers here, so the numbers were actually quite high, 400-ish, pretty much all the way through this set of data, all the way through those buckets. And so the very lowest EPS ranked stocks had 2% gains, and then it was about 0.5% for all of these, and didn't actually start improving beyond that until you got into the 91 to the 100s. So that's EPS rank. Relative strength rank, that's how it performed. The very low relative strengths had good gains, and the very high relative strengths had good gains. Everything else in the middle didn't do so well. Let's look at group rank. How did group rank have an effect last week? Well, if stocks were in groups that had a high rank, the 91 to 100, then they had a 4% gain last week. If they were in groups that had a very low rank, they had a 10% gain. Anywhere in the middle tended to be a loss. The AD letter rank, that's another field in HGSI. Stocks will be ranked with a letter, A through E, and A being good and E being bad. And here you've got the A's showing a 2.5% gain last week, but the E's showing a 3% gain. Very low number of stocks in the E group, 129. Very low in the A group, 209. And then in the middle, you've got a lot more stocks. The D's, which had 1,800 stocks, didn't do so well. But the C's, with 3,090 stocks, had a 0.34% gain. There's the HGS boxes. So in the warehouse, stocks are given a box. I won't get into what HGS boxes mean. You can look in the HGSI documentation for that. But here are the boxes split out, box 0 through box 9. And this is the performance of those various boxes, with box 9 doing the best with a 3% gain. A new one that was just added this weekend is the demand supply. And demand supply is split into various buckets as well. And these buckets are slightly different, and you can actually go in and change these if you find the demand supply, because it's not very linear from 0 to 100% and beyond. You can actually go in to the template before you run it and change your from and your to get different ranges and get your own buckets information. But the way that these buckets are organized, this is how demand and supply had an effect last week. The 10 to 100% demand supply and the 5 to 10% had roughly 5% gains. Anything below that didn't do so well. And most of that information is put on the dashboard, so you don't have to go into the individual worksheets to look at that. You can look at the dashboard. The big chart at the top is the ERG, which we saw in the ERG sheet over here. So it's just copied over into the dashboard. And then you've got EPS rank, relative strength rank, group rank, AD letter rank, and HGS boxes. So this snapshot just gives you a quick view. The demand supply is not on here. That is a new sheet that was just added this weekend. Unsure as to the usefulness of that, but maybe we can add that to the dashboard if it proves to be a useful value. So here's a summary, and this is just something to give you a clue as to what types of things performed well over a specific period of time. Now remember, I said before, to choose a starting date, you have to have the warehouse file for that date you're starting from, because that's got the correct information. For instance, that will have the correct AD letter rank for the stocks on that particular day. So you need to have that for your starting day. Now, providing you go into EdgeRater every day or once a week, however frequently you want to do it, providing you go into EdgeRater and actually run the template, the generate indexes from warehouse, every time you run this, you will get a brand new one of these files, which will just give you a lot of opportunities as time goes on to go back and investigate certain time periods and see how those fields in HGSI, how stocks with various categorizations performed over periods of time. So that's the warehouse template. Another thing that last weekend I didn't get into was the US market summary template. So I'm just going to go ahead and run market summary template. This is a template that doesn't need to be run against a symbol list. So it doesn't matter what symbol list I have chosen on the left-hand side. It contains all of the information within the worksheets of the template. So when I run it, it's going to use my default data provider to fetch data. My default data provider, as I said last weekend, has been set up to HGSI. And so in the template itself, if we look in the header row 6, you can see there are symbols here like $SPX, $DJI, $IUXX. These are all symbols that are available in HGSI. So when the template runs, it will look at the symbols and it will then try and fetch that information from wherever the default provider is, in this case HGSI. So it's got the correct information. Okay, so the market summary template gives us a nice color-coded state of the market. We can shrink this down so that you don't really need to see the numbers is the point in here. You can really look at the colors to get an idea of the general state of the market. So green is good. Yellow here is market's undecided. It's maybe coming out of a bad situation. And it normally goes red, yellow, green, and green, yellow, red to get into bad situations. So, for instance, the yellow here down on 421 was a little bit of a warning because all of these markets turned yellow, but it didn't stay. They didn't stay yellow, and they've come back into green situation now, which is healthy for the market. The blue line is the percent 1 day change. So anyway, the color, sorry. Percent B, these colors are based on percent B. So it's where those indexes are in relation to their Bollinger Bands. So you have to be above or 7 and above to have a green color. So the index has to be in the top half or in the top third in the top 30% essentially of the Bollinger Bands. Yellow it's between 0.3 and 0.7. So the indexes are not at the top, they're not at the very bottom, somewhere in the middle. And then red is that the indexes are towards the lower end of the Bollinger Bands or below the lower Bollinger Band. So red is big, is the market's not in a healthy state when it's red. The blue on the %B 1 day change is how much that %B value has changed overnight, from one day to the next. And there's HGSI terminology is the kahuna. You get a kahuna if %B 1 day change is 0.3 or above, or 0.24 or above, actually, in this case. So a solid row of blue is always something to watch for after periods of red and yellow, because that normally indicates that there's been an impulse has come into the markets, and from that point on you might start to see a better market condition, which in this case you did from 4/6/2020. If I double click on one of these, it will actually bring me a chart, and the edge event is just pointing at the day that I clicked on. So it's just saying here was the day, this was the day that we had the kahuna. And if I look at the various markets here, you'll see it's pointing, I'll scroll across here. This is the day that you had the kahuna, and the market has done reasonably well since that kahuna, and we've had a period of green since then. So let's go back and look at, there are other cases where you almost got a full blue line. So back here, but you are coming from red in this case. So it doesn't, a kahuna line does not always lead to better market conditions. You really want to see green occurring over in your %B numbers in order to have a good market for the long side trades. If you see a solid red, that's a bad situation. That is a down kahuna, where a %B 1 day change, it has skipped in %B terms 4 buckets or more. Okay, so a row of red is really bad sign for the market. In this case, that was a very good warning right here on 2/24, and we had been in a green period for the market up to that point. So look at the greens, and as I go through here, we'll just see that we were green all the way up here. Green, 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 green. Got one yellow coming in there. Then we had a row of yellows, so the market was deteriorating there. And then we got the big kahuna down, and that was this big gap down here. And then the market did sell off from there. So we ended up in red essentially for quite a long period after that. Tried to come out here with some yellow areas, but pretty much red across the board and all the way down to the bottom. So this is a very good tool for looking at the overall state of the market. The US market summary template, I can just zoom out here and just look at the color codings and just get a quick visual of how all of these major markets are doing and whether or not the market is in a healthy situation to trade. So that's what I wanted to show with US market summary template, and that is it. Thanks for watching. See you next time.